should you watch Sinners in theaters? The short answer is absolutely 100% yes, go watch it. This is a very well made and deeply meaningful film that's resonating with a lot of people. It blends historical drama and cultural allegory with genre filmmaking to make something that's really impressive and unique. But it's not a traditional horror movie, and it's not perfect either. So if you go in with the right expectations, I think you'll find a lot to appreciate here in this movie. I'm René, and I like to talk about movies. I do want to quickly address something first before jumping into the review. My first impressions video for this movie got a lot of feedback. Most of it was pretty critical, and honestly, I get it. Those other videos that we post are meant to be very quick and just like surface level reactions right after watching the movie. There were 4 of us for that video, and each of us only talked for like 15-20 seconds max. In that type of format, it is very difficult to flesh out deeper level thoughts, especially about a movie that has so much to it. Personally, I was very shocked while watching this movie because I had my expectations set so high because of all the ratings and all the rave reviews that were coming out from this movie. And yes, I do listen to scores and ratings, especially when it comes to a movie that is rated this high and it's an original work. Also, scores and reviews are kind of baked into the marketing of most movies nowadays, including Sinners, so it's kind of hard to avoid that kind of outside influence. So I went into this movie super excited, and because of that, I didn't really get to explain what I liked and what I didn't like. My initial reaction to this movie was a what? Because I just expected a little bit more from it, which is exactly what led to some misunderstandings on my other video, and that's on me. But a lot of people were upset because they felt like I didn't like the movie, which I felt like I was being gaslit into thinking that I didn't like the movie, when in the video I specifically said I do like the movie, I just expected more. So I just want to clarify in this full review video that I do like Sinners. I think it is a great movie, but it's also complex and ambitious, and it's a movie that deserves a lot more conversation than just a quick 15-20 seconds. I'm definitely not walking back on my opinions on this movie, but I do want to be fair to the conversation and just talk about what I actually did like and not like in depth. But anyways, let's talk about Sinners. I want to start with what this movie does incredibly well, which on a technical level, like, this movie is top tier. The direction, the visuals, the sound, and especially the music are all just phenomenal. The score doesn't just set the mood, it's kind of like a character in its own. It tells a story, it's dynamic, it's emotional, and in certain scenes, it honestly gives you chills. One sequence in particular that got mixed in with the music is honestly so good that it's one of those scenes that's going to be talked about for years. If you've seen the movie, you know exactly what scene I'm talking about. The performances were also excellent. Michael B. Jordan did great as usual, but this role particularly kind of solidifies him as that like icon, you know? Honestly, I was pretty impressed with everyone in the cast. Like, everyone flowed really well. It seemed realistic. Like, their personalities were just awesome. Great acting and great characters. Another favorite of mine was the main villain, Remick. Like, him as the main vampire, that guy was so intimidating, and he wasn't even trying to be. Also, I have to give credit to the story's cultural weight. The movie is deeply rooted in Black American history, and it definitely does not shy away from that. On top of all that, the vampires, while they're like fictional creatures, they do play a really important metaphor in this story. There's a real cultural significance in the way that the vampires are rooted in this culture. Like, they didn't just include vampires just for the sake of it to be different. They included it because it mattered and was really well baked in there. And also, the vampires themselves looked cool. Like, they were pretty basic, but in a unique and like intimidating way. The eyes were a crazy detail. I love that. That said, there are some things that I did not like about the vampires. Some of the vampire stuff could have been a little bit more fleshed out. Not removed by any means, just refined and made to make more sense. The rules to me felt very loose and just convenient to the plot. Some of these vampires could fly, they were really fast, and they were seemingly indestructible outside of like the typical vampire tropes like wooden stakes and garlic and that kind of stuff. The movie doesn't really explain the limits of their power or when and why they choose or not choose to use certain abilities. For example, if they can all fly and be part of this kind of like hive mind with shared memories, which is alluded to in the movie, then why is that not consistent throughout the movie? The lack of clarity and consistency with that kind of stuff is what made the third act feel a little bit messy to me, especially during one of the final action set pieces. We go from the vampires being like a force to be reckoned with to then just being kind of like easy to deal with. For context, it's assumed that 6 vampires alone were able to take down dozens of people in this movie. This does happen off camera, but it just kind of proves that these vampires are pretty strong, right? Then later in the movie, we see this same group of vampires, except now there's dozens of them because they turned all of those humans into vampires. And during like the final standoff, the humans that are remaining, which aren't many of them, are able to handle the vampires better than I expected. Granted, they had impromptu weapons and like garlic and stuff like that, which I guess is what gave them the edge. I don't know, that just seemed a little bit lazy to me considering how well thought out the rest of the movie is. The threat levels of the vampires were kind of like fluctuating depending on like what was needed for the story. Honestly, I don't have much feedback for the movie outside of the vampire stuff. Like, we see characters that have been portrayed as intelligent and strategic just start acting in really dumb ways. So the characters kind of assume that there is someone that is unalive because there's a red liquid around this person's body, which didn't make a lot of sense because because we as the audience is aware of like what's going on pretty much the entire time. And even one of the characters mentions that like it's not possible that that person got attacked. This moment leads to a scene where the characters are doing like a vampire test to figure out if any one of them is a vampire like intruder, which this moment was pretty funny, but it's also kind of silly considering how serious the rest of the movie is. It just felt a little goofy to me. So then the characters realize that they made a mistake and they go check on the body, and it turns out that it wasn't a vampire turning. It was just a regular person knocked out. They find this out by going back to the crime scene, and what they thought was a pool of blood was actually just a bottle of wine that was knocked over, and the bottle of wine was literally right next to the body. Like it took them like 2 seconds to figure that out after they went back. Oops, I guess. It's a small thing, but in a movie this smart, stuff like that really stands out like a sore thumb. Another example is a character cuts themselves to like distract the vampires and let their friends escape. Like sure, the classic sacrifice play, but then the vampires just pause there just long enough to let their friends just run away. And they don't even attack the character right away. They just kind of like sit there like cautiously waiting for the right time. And by the way, the characters that ran away, for some reason, they ran into other vampires that were smart enough to leave the building and then flank them on the other side. So that just really didn't make any sense to me. Like, are they calculating and smart, or are they just aggressive and like bloodthirsty creatures? Which one is it? Because this movie doesn't really set that clear boundary, so it's just confusing when they do one thing and then they change it up and do something else entirely. Also, there's a part during the final standoff where a character unalives, and two of the characters have like this really sweet goodbye moment, which is nice and all, but when do you have time for that? Like, the vampires were flooding in like water one after the other, and again, there's dozens of them, so I just found it a little bit unrealistic that they had the time to do all that. Last thing, the pacing was also really mixed bag for me. The first half of this movie is honestly really slow, and I personally really liked it because you get to learn the characters, you get to grow and care about them, and you get to see the world that they live in. But then once the vampire stuff happens, it just speeds up and it just kind of chops up through everything. I'm not complaining that there's vampire stuff. Like, I get it and I like it, but just that tonal shift from very slow to really quick, it's just way too abrupt. I feel like the transition there could have been smoother. It almost feels like they deleted footage from the original cut. Also, this is more of a personal note, but there's a really big mixture of genres in this movie. Like, there's drama, there's thriller, there's horror, there's even comedy, some romance, and even action. And honestly, for the most part, all of that works. But for me personally, the horror just fell flat. It wasn't scary, it wasn't creepy, and it definitely didn't build up any tension that horror usually does, which is fine because the other stuff works well without having to add horror elements. But this movie is really being marketed and has that identity of a vampire horror movie. Like, even post-release, it's being touted as one of the best horror movies of this decade. Like, yeah, maybe it is one of the best movies of this decade, but one of the best horror movies? I just don't feel like it fits in that classification. At this point, I've seen Sinners twice now in theaters. I've had some more time to process, and obviously I've heard the feedback from my other video. I am raising my score from a 7 to an 8 out of 10, just because it is a really good movie, and I think my first impressions from that first impressions video were really tainted by the reviews and all the other outside influence. Sinners is not a perfect movie, but it is definitely an important one. It's visually stunning, it's really well acted, and it's rich in culture. Like I said, I still think the horror elements could have been a lot more refined, but I respect the ambition here, and I respect that it is a different and original story. And more than anything, I appreciate how people are resonating with this movie. If you haven't seen this movie yet, you are definitely missing out. It is a 100% must-watch in-theater experience. It is not my favorite movie of this year, but it definitely is in my top 5. But as always, watch movies, form your own opinion, and I'll see you on the next one.